Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join the Silver Fox Advisors for our first Education Series program in 2021. My name is Joseph Tung, and I'm honored to serve as the chair of the Education Committee for the Silver Fox Advisors, which is a group of experienced business leaders that advises, consults, and mentors the Houston business community since 1986. Our goal is to empower business owners to become successful, and we are excited to celebrate our 35th anniversary in 2021. Our organization supports 20 CEO roundtables for nearly 200 CEOs across the greater Houston area. It typically meets once a month physically, but with COVID-19, many of our roundtables have pivoted into meeting virtually more frequently or as needed. These roundtables are complimentary to join and provide valuable peer support during this critical time. If you're interested in joining, you can find more information at our website. We also provide complimentary virtual lunch and learn programs on our Education Series webinars, such as this one. We can also provide individual advisory board and professional services on a fee basis. You can find this and more information at our website, www.silverfox.org. I would like to take time to thank our in-kind sponsors, Griffing & Company and Pure Pont. Jim Griffing and Phil Morbido have decades of experience with the Silver Foxes and provide outstanding accounting and marketing services. We encourage you to check out their websites and social media presence of these two great award-winning companies. After the presentation, we will take questions from the Q&A button or the chat box. As the resident lawyer for today, I can confidently say that no presentation would be complete without a legal disclaimer. As such, the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by any presenter solely belong to that person and are not attributable to other people, groups, employers, organizations, or the Silver Fox Advisors. Notwithstanding each individual's excellent credentials and licenses, the information provided does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or accounting advice, but is designed only to provide general information relating to business and commerce. Our presentation today addresses a critical issue facing businesses everywhere as we survive and emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. Our presenters will tackle the science of selling in that world. It is my honor to introduce our two presenters. Rich Hall is an executive coach and business advisor for private and family-owned companies looking to grow. Rich advises on growth strategies that include sales and marketing, operations, technology, and more. Rich focuses on developing leaders and their teams to become better every day to overcome personal challenges for success. Prior to becoming a coach, Rich led a family-owned business to achieve record revenue growth and profitability in his first year leading the company. He has helped companies ranging from Fortune 10 to entrepreneurial startups. He's well-versed in leveraging social media websites and various technologies to help clients achieve their vision of success. Mark Miller is an advanced degree chemist. He's living proof that sales professionals are made, not born, into their roles. He has sold and managed for Fortune 50, startups, mid-sized, and family-owned businesses. These businesses provided scientific instrumentation, valves, pipe, financial service, insurance, software, promotional products, and more. This experience gives Mark the unique ability to use his talents to save you time while growing your business. Most consultants want you to pay for their time. Mark will value your time and ask you to pay only for better performance and increased profit. Mark offers a uniquely licensed sales audit that will discover the facets of your sales and marketing processes that need to be polished to brighten up your top line. I now turn over the presentation to Mark and Rich.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining. Glad you could be with us today. We've got a lot to cover, and we're going to go through this information for you. Keep in mind, we will make the presentation available afterwards, the recording. If you have questions, put it in the chat. If we're not able to get to the level of detail we need to, happy to respond. So let's go ahead and get started. The question that a lot of people have asked us is, are the changes that have occurred in the sales process and the buying process due to COVID, is that something that's just an anomaly and we're going to go back to the way we were? Or is that something that's really an accelerant of the way things are going to change and be in the future? I think some of the facts will bear this out. If you look at the process today of people before they make a purchase or even talk to a salesperson, nearly 3/4 of the people out there are doing their research online before they ever speak. So what does that mean? You really want to make sure and have the ability to educate your buyer and do it in such a way that makes it easy for them to find the information they're looking for. We're going to talk about this a little bit further, but I think the statistics are pretty telling here. Companies that have developed a formalized social media selling process are much more likely to hit their revenue targets. So there's another method that was in place prior to COVID, but I think is only accelerating as well. What's interesting is also a lot of the sales executives are saying that it's changing so fast that the organizations are not able to keep up. So, it's got to be fast. It's got to be flexible. You've got to be responsive to inquiries, because so many out there already know what they're looking for, right? And they want to speak to you. And that time for a sales process is closing greatly. I think our last bullet here is pretty telling. Those B2B marketers that have adopted social media are generating revenue, or at least generating leads, 44% through LinkedIn, 39% Facebook, even Twitter. What if you're not in that category? What are you doing about it? We're going to talk about this a little bit more. Frankly, from my perspective, I don't think we're going back. I think we're just moving that much faster, full speed ahead. So let's talk about a typical sales department. And hopefully this resonates, but I've seen this in a lot of companies that I've worked with, and this is not uncommon. So if you fall in this category, don't feel bad. That's part of what we're talking about. But with many sales departments today, there's little to no forecasting or predictability of the upcoming revenue. A lot of it's tied to emotions. You've got a salesperson maybe working on a big deal. You ask how they're doing, and they said, "Oh, it's a great conversation. We're going to close this thing. They're going to sign within 2 weeks." And then 2 months later it goes by, and it may or may not happen. That's an example of emotional versus a factual process to follow. And we believe that the need for this process, again, will just, it separates those that do not have predictability to those that say, I want to know 6 months out what my revenue forecast is. Within 3 months, I need it to be pretty rock solid. Now, we know with COVID coming in, it's been a little bit difficult, but I've seen it work, and it works great. And based on the things we're going to talk about. Typical sales department, many do not have repeatable sales processes. You can ask them, what's your process? Oh, well, we do this, we contact these customers, and et cetera. But it's really nothing formal. And when they hire a salesperson to come in, they need revenue, right? So there's not that much time spent on product training, preparing the sales rep, educating them on the process, unless they came from a company or an environment where, they were using the same process. Maybe there's not even consistency. So if one salesperson says, yes, looking great, we're going to close this one. Another one says 2-3 months out. We all know salespeople, right? They're going to be optimistic, and we want them to be, but there needs to be something to follow. Marketing on lead generation, especially on social media, a lot of it's not strategic. When I've worked with companies on how to leverage these technologies, quite often I go all the way back to the beginning. What's your company values? What's your branding? What's your messaging? Because this kind of information is what's really needed as the foundation of then the content that you put out in the various formats, in the various platforms that we've got, that we'll talk a little bit later. Again, we've talked a lot of companies, even today, I don't know this social media thing. I'm not on LinkedIn. I don't have time for that. But our prior slide showed the facts. So I think it's pretty important that if you're not doing it today, you need to engage. And the goal, I think, for everyone today is to grow, but many just do not have a solid plan on how to get there. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about this morning, and hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, Rich. So what does success look like? Let's start with the end, all right, and figure out how to get there. It would be really nice to have a predictable sales forecast so that you knew 3, 6, 9 months out exactly what was going to be coming in and what happened. I think we'd all like to have a forecast that we could depend on and live by. A repeatable sales process. And we've used some examples of the franchise models, the Sandler, Challenger, Venue, whatever. I spent a lot of time in the Sandler world, almost 13 years. So, that's the one I sold. That's the one I use. Is it the best? I don't know, but it works for me. I will tell you that all of you folks out there who are business owners tend to come from two different places. Either they have a really good idea that the market needs, or there's somebody that can sell almost anything. And for those of you who fall into the latter, that are somebody that can sell almost anything, this process stuff is probably not going to work for you, but it should work for your employees. So let's talk about that later in the presentation, but those are previews of coming attraction. Because I'm pushing a process, all you owners who are top salespeople, please don't tune me out yet. Proper onboarding of salespeople. Salespeople are the most difficult to hire and probably the hardest to fire, right? Because we hire salespeople to bring in revenue. And sometimes we just get down to the point where something is better than nothing. The devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And we want to get you out of that sort of fear-based, sales management process. Targeted marketing, providing qualified leads into the sales funnel. We all talk about that, but how do they get there? And what is a lead? And who does the marketing? And who does the lead generation? And so the mixture of, what we used to do back in the day, pre-COVID, and now what we're doing now. I mean, we never had a presentation like this on Zoom before last year. I didn't even know the word Zoom before March of last year, and probably none of the rest of you did. But this is here to stay. This is too easy. There are 68 of you here. We could have never gotten 68 of y'all to drive somewhere and listen to a talk like this. So this may be something you want to keep in your repertoire and make sure you do it well. Sales communication integrated with other departments. And I've used some words in here that I really hate, like department. If your organization is siloed into this department, that department, whatever, let's get that changed and make it a collaborative business. And that is also so much easier because nobody's at work anymore. We're all at home. So now we've got them scattered. Let's bring them together as one unit. And let's work on building revenue, but we got to build profitable revenue. So next slide, please. So where do we start? Well, this is where we're going to ask you to do something that maybe you should be already doing, and maybe some of you are. And that is to take just a little bit of time and stop working in the business and work on the business. And depending on the size of the organization, that might be a half a day, it might be a day, it might be 2 days, but take some time and let's figure out where we are. Next slide, please. So let's look at what a best practices audit might look like. And, audit's a word that sends fear in most folks' souls. And we use that on purpose because let's take a serious look at what we're doing, because we can't get better if we don't know what we're doing now. We might be doing some things really well, and we need to do more of those. So let's just take a look at it. So let's figure out what the process is. And if you don't have a process, fine. Most people don't. I think when we go in and we ask someone to explain their sales process, that answer gets a bunch of blank stares all the time. And do sales processes exist? In your organization, maybe not, but I will tell you in successful businesses, they do. I've built them, Rich has built them, and you may have one. And I know some of you on this call have pretty good ones, Tracy and Lee. So is it documented? Do you have it written down? Can it be followed? Can it be managed? Can it be altered? Can it be improved? Can it be looked at? And while you're having this work on the business day, let's at least write down what happens and see what we want to keep and what we don't want to keep. Do you have any existing deal metrics? I'm not even going to talk about salespeople being trained on it, because if you don't have it, they're probably not trained on it. But when you do get it, they should be. Existing deal metrics, what's your average deal size? How much effort does it take to get money in? We measure salespeople often by the end result, total revenue. And okay, fine. Yes, that's why we hired them, is to bring in revenue. But if we measure it on the end, we won't be able to modify the process in the beginning. So what steps does it take to get X dollars into your company? A lead, a referral. Then what happens to that? What happens next? Do we always have to do a proposal? Can we close it without doing a proposal? Is there something we should be adding on to what they want? Are there residual sales we can get? On and on and on. So let's figure out the easiest way to get that done. And if you're not using technology, well, you wouldn't be on the call, right? So you must be using technology or you wouldn't be here. But remember, in your business, you got to track all this. And it's so easy these days with contact management systems. Customer relation management is easy to do. Once somebody gets into your relationship management system, they should never get out. All right. The only way they can get out is if somebody sends you a note and said, Mr. So-and-so has passed. Then you can take them out and ask them who replaced them and put them back in again. And let's continue to market them, because marketing to new customers, cold customers, is like a giant Keno wheel. You never know when you're going to hit them at the right time. So build the drip marketing, and we'll talk about that in a little while. What is your social media strategy? Well, I hope you have one. And if you don't, now's the time to build one. And how much of your business comes from people coming in, like walking in or calling you or emailing you or filling out a form on your website? And how much do you have to go get? All those people that I used to deal with that sold things like promotional products, copy machines, where they had to walk into X number of businesses every day. My guess is they're not doing that right now. So they're going to have to change and switch to social media. Next slide. So let's figure out what a qualified lead is first, and how do we call it qualified? It could be as simple as someone that goes to your website and fills out the form and asks for information. So you may call that qualified. I don't know, but whatever it is in your world, how do you get more of them? And if that's it, how are you going to drive more people to your website? Do you have the blog? Do you have whatever it is to get them there? And how are they generated? Is it by the blog? Is it by external emails? Is it somebody reaching out? Is it by, one person? Are your salespeople the only ones that bring leads in? And we'll think about that. Okay. If you've hired someone to bring in business and you want them to generate leads, so, there's X number of leads that bring you to business, and when you do the math, you'll find out that it's going to take several leads to get an order. So do you really want them doing both things? How you measure, track, and ultimately improve them? Well, you can't do that until you analyze them. So first of all, is just measure the number of leads you get in some time frame, a day, a week, a month, whatever, and see what happens to them. And make sure you have a definition for what a lead is. And then ultimately, how can you improve them moving through the process? Are you really touching them enough? Are you not touching them often enough? Or are you touching them too often? Are you incorporating digital, social media, newsletters, and video? You got to do it all. You're going to find something that works really well for you. Fine, focus on that, but don't stop doing the other things. I tell folks it's better to do a little bit of everything all the time than some of nothing ever. So do a little bit of something all the time and see where the results come from. Focus on that, but keep the others there. For example, not last year, but the year before, 40% of my business came from new customers, people I didn't know. Who knew? The year before that, 60% of the customer or 80% of the business came from people that I did know or referrals. So things change over time. Make sure you're doing a little bit of everything. How do you track the life cycle of a lead? And, the ones that you get that close, how long does that take? Where did that lead come from? Does one that comes from your website close faster than one that comes from a Google ad? Whatever. Or does it one that comes directly from your salesperson close faster? Or whatever your inbound marketing system is. Figure all those out and, work from there. Next slide. So here we are. Okay, all you type A, high D people that don't want to be told how to do anything. But if you can create a repeatable sales process, something that that even an average salesperson can follow, there's a lot of benefit to that, because we're going to talk about statistical distributions on the next slide. And, we're going to put a little science into the sort of fuzzy marketing world. There are proven processes. The Sandler system has one. And again, it's it's a rote system, X number of attempts, contacts, appointments, presentations, and closes. And you track them. But you may not be that rigid, and that's fine. But whatever your process is, it has to be something easy to follow. You can build it yourself. I'm going to tell you that if you're a really sharp salesperson, you're going to have a hard time doing that, because you're probably asking yourself every day, how come these guys just can't do it like I do? And they can't. So let's look at the next slide. Let's look at the skills distribution. And if you look at the bottom right, way down there in that little tail on the bottom right, and that represents about 2% of all of the total distribution. And that's called as sales skills, for example. So if you're one of those 2%ers, it's going to be awfully hard for you to reproduce what you've done to get there. Okay. I say that those people generally have a non-reproducible sales style. And that means you can't make, train, or implement whatever you do every day into your sales team. So let's figure out how to do that. All the 68% of the people in the middle and the other 13% on the right side. So, you're looking at 81% of the folks now that are available to sell for you if you have a repeatable process. If not, you're pretty much stuck with the 13%. So do you want to pay for the 13%er, or do you want to pay for the 81% and make a process that everyone can follow? And my guess is you want to have something that everyone can follow. A lot of good news there. It's easy to plug and play. If you're a larger organization, you're probably turning over 10% of your sales force every year. It's a continual hiring process, on and on. This makes it ever so much easier. If you're in the software world, you're looking for the top of the 13%, and some of those 2%, that's all they want to hire. And that's a tough gig, and they pay dearly for them. So incorporate your process into the CRM, and remember the statistical model. This goes for, salespeople, sales managers, owners. I happen to be a football official. We're in here. The guys that are on the left side don't last very long, just saying. So they go find something else to do. But we tend to keep salespeople beyond their profitability threshold.
Okay, so a lot of the questions that pop up nowadays are, let's get in a little bit more facts and details about the technology that's available to us. And a couple of tried and true. All right, here's something that's interesting that we've got a lot of research on here lately that says we've been using email for quite a while, right? But people have become so inundated with various platforms out there, between apps and social media and you name it, that email is still an effective campaign for leveraging content to clients or prospects, as well as generating opportunities for people to investigate further, to educate, and come back to your website. So I wouldn't abandon the newsletter yet. There are best practices out there over how to set them up, how to make sure that they're not hitting spam buckets. I've seen clients that say, yeah, we're doing newsletters, and then find out later that some of the technical details of configuration of them, and there's topics like DKIM, DMARC, things like that you set up, that a lot of the spam filters out there that companies have in place mark it as spam. So you maybe get hit 30, 40% spam rate, when in fact it's just a setting or two that you need to update. So that's one of those things, you can ask questions about, and ought to be able to find out where you're coming in out on your email. CRM, we've talked about it. Here's the key for me. Number one is get your process in place first. Your CRM should support your process. You can spend a lot of money on the CRM. I'm going to name a couple. One thing, for example, Salesforce came out to be known as one of the top CRM. I would agree with that. Highly configurable, customizable. It's got its own app store. A lot of great tools and capabilities with Salesforce. Here's the thing. You need somebody trained on it. And if you do, you need them trained to not only configure it, but to also get the information that you need back out of it, which is, running your reports, etc. I just bring that up because I'm a fan of Salesforce, but don't underestimate the work and the administration aspect of it. And they do have different tiers of configurable products that they have. There's other ones out there. Zoho has one. Zendesk has one. More smaller companies. I use a smaller one myself and relatively configurable for my needs. So, but again, leverage, develop a process first and then let the technology support the process. I call website integrations. There's tools out there that you can overlay within your website environment, so to speak. They'll give you really good information about where these leads are coming from, meaning where they came from. Was it a search engine? Was it social media? How did it get to your website? And then once it got to your website, what did they do once they were in there? How much time did they spend on a particular page? If you've got a certain number or percentage of opportunities or prospects come in, hit a page, and then they drop off, maybe you need to update that page. Or if there's a page that they spend more time on and then fill out a form, maybe that's a page you ought to send more people to. So this type of an analysis is out there. Again, one of the products, HubSpot's one, there's others out there, but really look at that science aspect behind it to see, really what is the buyer's life cycle as they're navigating your different technologies to get at the information. Because we go back, 74% of people are doing their research before they ever call the salesperson. This is how they're doing the research. So you want to make sure that you've got information for them and it's easy to get to. Videos. Okay. I know a lot of people, we're using videos before, but we've seen a dramatic increase in the rise. May not know this. Okay. YouTube, which is one of the primary video platforms, right? Okay. Number 2 search engine. Guess who owns YouTube? Google. Okay. So a lot of companies are uploading their content into YouTube because that's also another medium that can be searched and will also point back to your website. So, there's a lot of best practices about videos. If it's educational and training, great. If it's more content oriented, sort of short and sweet, or you may have a presentation that you recorded and there may be ways to cut it up into slices as multiple pieces of content. But if you're not using a video strategy, I'd recommend you look into that as well. All right, so let's talk about social media. It's a couple of things I'd love to, we could talk about this all day, but I think some of the highlights. Number 1, not all content is relevant for all forms of social media. Okay, so things like LinkedIn, for example. LinkedIn is business to business. That's more B2B relationships, okay, where you're connecting with individual people. Facebook is a lot of B2C. Right. Now, I'm not saying that you don't have a presence on all of these, but your content should be relevant. You've got Twitter out there, for example. You've got Instagram. Okay. Instagram is primarily videos where you may have music in the background or you may have text overlaying in the videos. All right. Just make sure your content is relevant. One thing that is brand new that I've used a few times, you may want to consider or to investigate, is called Clubhouse. Now, Clubhouse is an audio-only platform, and right now it's still in beta, and unless something's changed overnight, it's still also only on an iPhone platform. But you can create a audio room, so to speak, and then carry on a conversation, whether it's within 2 people within your company, whether it's your company and, let's say, an expert in the industry. And people can come in and listen to the conversation. They can raise their hand. And if you've got somebody monitoring and if you want them to participate, then you can let them join into the conversation as well. It's one of those newer platforms. We'll see how it really takes off. But the times that I've been engaged with it, there's a lot of great conversations out there that can be leveraged. Okay, So let's get to the last one with Google Ads. And again, there's a lot we could talk about. All right, everyone should be aware of SEO, which is search engine optimization. But basically what it is at the end of the day, you want to try to get your company ranked as high on the Google search results as possible. Okay. And I went through an interesting webinar here recently, and it was a pretty simple approach, but there's a website out there called WordArt, and we've all seen them. Sort of like we've got the display here on your screen. But what you can do is you can tell WordArt to use your URL or your website address, and it will demonstrate or put out there graphically the words that appear in the highest frequency. And these are the actual underlying words that search engines are seeing. So in this case, for example, I ran Silver Fox website through it, and it's not all bad. You know, it's got business, it's got advisors, it's got Fox out there. But I can tell you, I've worked with some companies that you would ask them, what's your sweet spot? What is it that you sell that you're the best at everyone else? And they would give, you know, the name, for example, or what that was. You run it through WordArt and you find out it doesn't exist at all, or maybe one or two. That means Google is not finding you. And sure enough, if you do your Google search, you're not going to find it there either. There's another tool, again, costs $10, keywords everywhere. And it's a plugin for, like, you can use it in Chrome. That's what I use for. And when you initiate a search in Google, it'll actually show you the number of hits, you know, or the number of searches, that have been performed over a certain time frame, what the cost of those searches would be in the event that you, or cost per click and some other metrics in case you decided to go down that path. But it'll also give you variations off of that. So for me, I put in my website, and, you know, shame on me, I was not near as leveraging the keywords as I should have. You know, people ask, what do you do? Well, I'm an executive coach and I'm a business advisor. And yet you pull it up and it didn't have executive coach as much as it should have highlighted. So I've got some work to do. Anyway, those are a couple of tools that can be used. A lot of conversation we can talk about. One thing I'd point out too, when you start going through social media, for example, each one has their own algorithms that you want to understand. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, for example. The thing about LinkedIn is they want you to stay on that platform, right? So if you have posts and advertisements on LinkedIn, and then within your post, you have a link, say, directly to your website, well, guess what? You're now directing traffic away from LinkedIn to go to your website. Sounds great, right? The challenge is LinkedIn's algorithm behind the scenes is not going to show it as much to as many of the audience, because they want you to stay there. There's some tricks. You know, you can put URLs and links in, like, the first comment and then refer to it in your post. Hey, if you want to learn more, check out the first comment. You can also buy ads. So again, we could spend an entire webinar on this type of information. I would just say, if you're not leveraging it today, or if you don't have someone on staff that's really comfortable, then start reaching out. You know, you can call us at Silver Fox. You can, plenty of consultants, but really that's a great way of starting expanding your breadth out in the marketplace.
Thanks, Rich. You know, Rich makes a good point, you know, is that all this process building, all the new internet stuff, even that one-day session I was trying to get you to do, and when you work on your business instead of in it, you know, maybe you need someone to help you with that. And if you do, you know, I'm a associate member. I'm a provider of the Silver Foxes, but there are 40 Silver Foxes that are proven business builders. Reach out to one of them. Let them facilitate your meeting so you get everything done you want to do, and just have someone else talk for a change. Anyway, let's talk about improving sales management. You know, the very last thing that we're going to talk about is improving salespeople. And, you know, for most of my career, I started with that, is trying to improve the salespeople. And what I've realized is maybe you should do all this other stuff first. Get a process, get a marketing plan, figure out what a lead is, and then start making a plan on how to improve your sales people. So let's talk about managing salespeople. And I think the best way to do that is create an activity-based performance model. And, I'm going to caution you right now and make sure it's an activity-based performance model so that we don't confuse productivity with activity, right? Because people will become active and look like they're productive, but really not. So unless you have the model of productivity and performance, you won't necessarily have the activity you need to generate more business. So key performance indicators based upon activity. A lot of salespeople's key performance indicators are based on dollars, and as they should be. If they have a sales goal, quota, whatever you call it, and they don't reach it, they're not doing what you hired them to do, and that isn't to bring in the revenue. But they don't have a lot of control over money. All they have control over is what they do every day. And that's how many contacts they make, how many people they talk to, how many proposals they write, how many phone calls they make, how many Zoom meetings they have. And those that are categorized by you as steps in the sales process. We make sure they're doing enough steps. And if they're doing enough steps, the money should fall out the other end. And if it doesn't, then they're not doing them properly. And that's when you can start improving the salespeople. But you've got to set the model for them to follow and hold them accountable. The salespeople are by far the ones that you should hire as slowly as you can and fire as quickly as you can. Because anybody that's worth their salt in selling should be able to sell themselves to you, and make sure that you hold these people accountable. And if they're not doing what you want them to do, either get them to do it or move on. And now that you have a process, you have that whole 68% or maybe even 81% of the world to look at, not just that top 3 or 4%. In sales sort of practices and hiring, no one is irreplaceable. You can always find someone else. Don't let them hold you hostage. And then Rich will give you the exception to that. Give individual coaching rather than group training. All right. Not everybody's the same. Being a sales manager is kind of like being a parent. And if you have more than one child, you know that they're vastly different. Okay. If you have more than one salespeople, oh my goodness, you're going to have to treat each one of them differently. So make sure you're giving the coaching, guidance, and mentoring that they need specifically, not that the group needs. Right. This is one situation where group coaching probably isn't effective. Make sure you continue to reinforce the methodology. How did that Zoom meeting go? Did you have the one with ABC company? Is the XYZ company lined up for tomorrow? Make sure that you know what they're doing and that you look into it. And leverage the statistics. Find out what works and let the statistics work for you. Do more of what works. How many leads, how many follow-ups, how many calls, all that to land a new sale. And if somebody has figured out how to do it with less follow-ups or less calls, let's mold that into everyone's daily practice. But you won't know that unless you keep track of it. So I'm going to tell you to keep track of it, keep track of it, keep track of it. New deals versus referrals. I mean, that if you're looking, everybody says to me, Mark, I need new clients. And yeah, maybe they do. Okay. But new clients are really hard to find. And before the pandemic, if you just had a cold list of people that you wanted to go find, the numbers were something like 0.5 to 2% of that cold list would ever buy anything from you. Then if you have a list of existing clients and you have something else to sell to them, that list is about 95% that they'll buy the next thing from you. If they bought, the valve, maybe they'll buy the pipe. If they bought the pipe, maybe they'll buy the valve. If they bought the widget, maybe they'll buy the it, whatever. And, how about a service contract, spare part, whatever. Figure out something else you can sell to your existing clients. And all those people last year that told you no or disappeared, dig them all up because they were interested enough to get you to the yes or no place last year. Let's find out if they're still in business and what you can do to help them now. So referrals are always better. The numbers for referrals are something like 25 to 50%, but better on introduction. And now the Zoom folks have given us a wonderful way to have introductions. We used to have to get two people somewhere, at a coffee shop, at a ball game, a golf course, wherever. Now, all we have to do is have them sit where they are and get a existing client to tell your prospect how wonderful you are. Please do that. Get as many introductions as you can. Those numbers are something like 35 to 70%. Okay, Rich, tell them how to sell.
So one example I'd like to share with you is you've heard Mark and I talk this morning a lot about the importance of the sales process. And I want to give you two examples. The first one was I've seen it in person with a company that had basically a stagnant business model. All the competitors were known, all the products were known, and revenue was pretty stagnant. And it's generated good money, but not any kind of growth. And then a lot of the focus became more, like Mark was saying, not on new sales, but it came on, recurring revenue from existing clients, for example, which is fine, but without the growth, eventually you're going to have problems because, clients go away or go through mergers, acquisitions, or whatever. And we brought in a formally trained salesperson, and I won't say which process, but they really followed the process to a T. And I had doubts. I didn't think it was going to work because, again, of the type of environment we were in. And amazingly, within, I would say, the first 3 to 4 months after everyone was trained and started using the process, you would start to see the uptick. And within about 12 months, the company had one of the highest revenue years that it had ever had. So I've seen multiple examples of that. I want to give you something else. It's just a little, maybe tool or something to think about. Your highest performing salespeople, most of them don't like things like keeping track of CRM and the data. They're people, people person. They're social. They're not about typing in all the notes of a particular call. If you've got a rainmaker that is just killing it and say beating 2 to 3 times their targets, consider alternatives. One approach that I've implemented before is if somebody is killing it this well, don't bypass the process. Maybe you hire a sales assistant type person or a sales, admin for them, and let them tag along and supplement what your rainmakers are not comfortable with. Okay, that's just an example of a way that you can get creative without bypassing the process. Hiring salespeople, let me tell you, that's one of those things that I advocate spending a lot of time with, because once you have them on board, again, and we'll talk in a second about hiring process, but once you have them on board, they're the ones with a relationship with clients, right? And, if you got a performance problem or an issue, it could impact your clients. You can be locked down in a contract with them. But then if you ultimately say this is not working, you let them go. What if your competition snatches them up and then clients go with them? So you really want to spend your time on salespeople up front, preparing them, making sure you got the right ones. So what's your hiring process for salespeople? I've used personality assessments myself, and I'm certified in one of them. I'm familiar with quite a few. So, whether it's Myers-Briggs, DISC, Predictive Index, Berkman, you name it. The thing is, having an assessment to better understand the underlying aspect with a candidate is highly critical, especially in the sales process. Let me give you an example. I have a very high social energy rating on one of the assessments. Okay. And that means I can do this all day. I enjoy meeting people, spending time with people. But the assessment identifies that at some point in time, I'm going to hit a wall. And if I hit that wall, I go completely opposite and I need alone time to recharge. Okay. Now, if I was working in sales on an 8-to-5 job, that would be fine. But we all know that in certain industries, you may have your salespeople have to spend all day with clients. Maybe you go to a conference, whenever we open back up some. And then in the evenings, you're entertaining clients, right? So you go during the day and then boom, you entertain clients at night, and then you got to start back up in the morning. I'd be horrible at that job if I went directly from the floor to entertainment. Okay. So one of the things that I learned both about me, but in the process, I learned when hiring salespeople was that I only needed 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour of recharge time. So I wouldn't make my schedule such that if I'm on a conference floor, I would finish up at, say, 4:30. Give me an hour, go back to the room, quiet time, recharge. I'm great to go. Okay. But if you didn't know that about me, then you would wonder why my performance would drop off and we're not closing deals at these conferences. Okay. So that's just one good way of using an assessment. Hopefully that helps. Because the reality is, most people do not have formal interviewing processes to really drill in on the candidate and ask them relevant questions. What do people do? Most companies, when they interview, is, did we like them? Were they good personalities? And, oh yeah, we associated well, but may find out that the underlying skills or traits just wasn't what you needed. So consider using a personality assessment. Assess along the way. Again, establish KPIs. Most people know that with a sales process, it's a volume game as well, right? How many conversations do you have, or how many leads? Are they qualified? We could talk about that all day, back and forth with marketing over the qualification process. You reach out, you have the conversations. Are you getting the volume that you need? Is the salesperson successful at one aspect or another? Maybe they're good once they get them on the phone, or maybe they're not. Maybe they need a little help. If so, then work with them. This is one of those where you don't want to just go blind. Assess, see where they're at. Things like CRMs can help, or just spending time with them from a sales management perspective. Training, again, product training. You get new releases. Make sure they're comfortable with what's coming out. Make sure that if there's updates or training on the process. Here's the thing that most companies make a mistake on as well. You introduce a new sales process. All right, you get everybody in the sales team trained, right? You're doing great. All of a sudden you start growing. Well, you need to hire somebody. Have you set aside time to get the new hire or new hires trained on the process? If you haven't, then again, you're weakening the team. So you've got to set aside time for that. I can guarantee you, we've all run the numbers: lower turnover, higher margins. Therefore, it's better to do a great job up front in the hiring and selection process. And then when you keep them on board, now you've got them longer and you're actually going to save more money in the process. All right, last bullet point, and then we're going to wrap it up and open for questions. So developing a compensation model, that can be tough, especially if you're high on the commission based, or if you're more of a fixed dollar amount or salaried with a lower. Okay. Obviously, you want a compensation model that reinforces, number one, the type of behavior you're looking for, and ensures that your salespeople are properly compensated. You've probably got a good idea, or you could research what middle tier, upper tier, salespeople in certain industries make, and then investigate scenarios as you put together the model. Here's what I would say. Investigate the models on the extremes. Okay. If it's a high variable model where, they're getting high commissions, how is management and ownership going to react if they absolutely crush it? Okay. Are you going to have an open-ended model? I like the open-ended model because if they're really selling that much, then guess what? You're going to continue making. I'd love to have a sales rep come into work driving a 7 Series, BMW, $10,000 suit, you name it, because it means they're really killing it. Here's the thing to be careful, though. Here's part of the nuances that I've seen and I've worked through myself in my career. Some companies don't like the fact that a salesperson can make more than, say, the owner of the company or an executive in the company. So what they'll do is they'll put a cap on it. Okay. I disagree with those type of caps, because where does the motivation and the incentive go for the salesperson to continue? I'll tell you what most of the time happens. They carry it over to the next year, if at all possible. And then when they do, maybe you could have had it this year. You could have had a fantastic wrap up of the year. And it was all because the compensation model wasn't where it needs to be. So hopefully this wraps up our presentation. Open for questions. We've got a little bit of time left. I'd say next slide. And if we can answer any, fantastic. You'll also see our contact information shortly. So Joseph, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Rich. We've got our first question from John Sweeney. It says, with COVID, we are newly accustomed to remote connection. How important is face-to-face connection now versus when it was pre-COVID? That's for you guys.
Oh, I'll take it, Rich, if you want.
All right, go ahead.
John, that's a wonderful question, and you're going to hate the answer, but it really depends. I think there are some number of people who are sort of the social folks that want to they can't wait to get back to have lunch with somebody, go out to dinner, go to a meeting, whatever. And then there are some of us who have found that this is such a time-saving, wonderful thing that we can do, that it's just going to depend on who it is on the other end. And the only way to find out is ask. And hey, Mr. Prospect, you want to go have a cup of coffee? No, I'd rather do this. Okay, fine. And make sure you're good at both.
I like to meet clients too where they're at, right? Because this whole Zoom fatigue is real. And, for some people it's quite convenient. And it's like, listen, I can pop on a quick meeting and, be done in 30 minutes versus bringing somebody in, maybe have a tour, scheduling, timing and et cetera. But I know that for me personally, I love the idea of shaking hands, saying hello, getting to meet people, making it personable versus talking through a screen. But a lot of it's going to be dependent on the clients and what their comfort zone is and where they're at. So I would say for me, gauge it on a client basis. And if you've got staff that's comfortable and the clients are comfortable, I prefer an in-person if at all possible. Although I understand the convenience of Zoom, and I don't think it's going away at all.
We've got two more questions. The first one is from Lee Bogle. She says, word art is cool and eye-opening. Question, what is your favorite hashtag finder for LinkedIn and Facebook? I'm guessing that's a Rich question. The next question is from Fred Costa. He says, what about a fractional salesperson? Do you know of a fractional sales service? And I think that might be a Mark and Rich question, but I'll leave it to you guys to decide.
Hey, Lee, good question on both LinkedIn and Facebook. I'll tell you a couple of the techniques that I use. And I wouldn't really say a product as far as hashtag finder and et cetera that I've used as much, but I think there's some of the basics that a lot of people don't incorporate, again, around the algorithm. Is like, for example, on LinkedIn, is I'll use hashtags because people that will search hashtags, you don't have to be necessarily connected to them to actually see the search results. So I incorporate hashtags in my, posts that I have. I'll also tag quite a few people that I think may be relevant, because keep in mind what'll happen too is it'll appear on their timelines. Okay. Other things I'd recommend doing on like the LinkedIns and the Facebooks are investigate, whether it's buying ads or what it would cost from a targeting perspective. I use Sales Navigator on LinkedIn. That allows me to have a lot of access. Facebook, what I've noticed is I've had content that I put on Facebook that shows up in search results on like Google a whole lot better than I have some of the other platforms. Okay. And it may just be the videos or the images, but a couple of things you can do, you may see them. When you put content like videos or even images out there, you have the ability to add what's called alternative text to it. And alternative text is if they can't search the image itself, then what text should the search engine grab and use in place of the image? And if you put, Silver Fox Advisors or your company name in there, that's just one more piece of content that the search engine is going to pick and start pointing back. So hopefully that helps a little bit. There's a lot of information out there, and I could certainly point towards some websites and presentations offline that could help, drill in that a good bit further.
Just to be fair, I do hashtag on Facebook and LinkedIn, both Rich and Mark. So I wasn't trying to dismiss Mark's hashtag skill sets. The fractional salesperson question is still there, but there's one more question about the difference between activity. Please go over the difference between activity-based performance model and productivity plan activity. That's from Wande Adediji, who sits on my CEO roundtable. So guys, those are our last three questions that we're going to take. Last two questions, excuse me.
I'll take the one from Fred, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, Fred. Yeah, I think I know you. You have sort of your own consulting business, and yeah, fractional sales management is a course available. And I would tell everyone out there that if they think they need some help, that they should try the Silver Fox Advisors first. Again, over 50 proven business builders. If you need some help in writing a Q&A on, who you want to hire, we can do that. Or there are any number of Foxes that have taken people to the next level on a sort of part-time basis. So that's my 2 cents.
I think one thing I would offer too, there are companies that can come in as well under a fractional sales approach and also be like a fractional sales department that can help you establish a process and actually, in essence, run your sales department on a fractional basis. And then as you start developing opportunities, start closing sales, you get more revenue coming in, they'll actually help you to find a sales executive, salespeople to replace them as they migrate out. So I know of some companies that way too. Again, feel free to reach offline. And I think, Mark, you've got one on the activity-based versus productivity.
Is that me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
the last question is from Wande Adediji. Please go over the difference between activity-based performance model and a productivity plan activity.
A productivity what? I'm sorry?
Plan, I guess, or the difference between activity-based and productivity-based.
Okay. Well, if activity isn't productive, then it's not worthwhile. So let's start there. So whatever plan you build, it has to be based on something that you can monitor, and the activity is easy to do. So let's monitor the activity. If whatever activity you're monitoring turns out not to be productive, change it. Okay. So that's the simple answer, I think.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys for an excellent presentation. This is the contact information for both of our presenters. You can reach them by email. Once again, thank you for giving us an hour of your time this morning, and great job, Rich and Mark. And we hope to see you guys soon. Take care, everybody.